Well, that figures. On this belated birthday episode of Hannibal and I, we'll be digging into one of my most favorite and anticipated recipes from the show, osso buco, and finishing off the night with a deadly round of punch romaine. So stick around, and welcome officially to Season 2 of Hannibal and I. Roll that beautiful music I love so much. Hello everyone, and welcome to Season 2 of Hannibal and I. And we are back with even more exciting, delicious, and dastardly culinary adventures in store, all set to beautiful classical music and hosted by yours truly. Oh, stop. Do go on. Now, before we get into the meat of this episode, I'm sure many of you may be wondering, but wait a second, Cody. I've been keeping track at home with my at-home Hannibal and I ham calendar, and isn't it about time for you to slice up and serve that miracle of culinary science? And yes, you would be right. After following all of the instructions to the letter, keeping careful tabs of my humidity and temperature levels, and devoting an entire year and a half to this project, I am finally able to report that the home-cured ham was a complete disaster. I'm not really sure where in the process things went wrong, but it just didn't come out right, and wasn't really cured all the way through. Okay, hit it. That's a lot of tannins. We seem to have to do this a lot on this show. But, lesson learned. As much as we want to get down to the nitty-gritty of it on this show and do everything from scritchety-scratch, we must sometimes concede to the expertise of, well, experts, and leave some things to the professionals. So, even though it didn't come out right, we'll still be crossing that one off the list because, hey, I tried. And it's way too involved of a project for me to just casually try again. And let's face it, you're not going to pay for it. But fear not, we will have a professionally cured prosciutto di Parma making its debut in another episode, coming soon. With that unpleasantness out of the way, let's move on to me, my birthday. For the love of... Cue the music! Yes, this dinner was courtesy of my birthday, which is great for two particular reasons. One, I get to make up for the fact that the last birthday episode I attempted was nothing but pictures and Frasier clips because my hard drive crashed. And two, because it's for my birthday, I don't have to follow any kind of theme or formula, it's just a menu of whatever I want. So again, I told my family that all I wanted for my birthday was to cook them a meal and have them cover the cost of the ingredients, and once again be guinea pigs to this strange and macabre yet delicious project of mine. Let the mayhem commence! Just like last year, we begin with breakfast, and for breakfast I chose the poetically elegant and relatively simple broken teacup parfait. This recipe, like so many others, was never made on the show, but rather represents a concept the show alludes to, which Janice has conceptualized into a dish. To really understand the importance of the teacup, we first start in the novel Hannibal. This is the third novel in the series by Thomas Harris, and details Hannibal's time in Florence after escaping at the end of Silence of the Lambs. In the book, it is revealed that often in his cell at the asylum, Hannibal would watch a movie about the late great astrophysicist Stephen Hawking called A Brief History of Time.
You may see a cup of tea fall off a table and break into pieces on the floor, but you will never see the cup gather itself back together and jump back on the table.
The book continues to tell us that Dr. Lecter was a great admirer of Professor Hawking, and particularly of a theory he once held where the universe would stop expanding and begin shrinking, much like a lung exhaling a breath after taking one in. If that were to happen, Hawking theorized that time itself would reverse, and the teacup would come together again. Even though Hawking eventually would consider this previous theory of his wrong, it still held a special place in Lecter's mind regarding his sister and her tragic demise. But the teacup is a way of Lecter imagining what it would be like if time did reverse and he could see his sister again, and the pain would mend itself just like the cup. The show takes this one step further with Abigail Hobbs and the paternal role that both Hannibal and Will take on for her. The quintessential moment of the teacups metaphor comes when Hannibal's master plan is revealed, that he faked Abigail's death in order to cause Will the same kind of hurt he experienced from losing his sister. But in the ultimate what in the Oh, but that is kind of sweet moment. We find out Hannibal has been keeping her alive all this time just to give her back to him, ultimately doing for Will what can never be done for him. Reversing time. Returning a loved one that was lost to you.
Time did reverse. The teacup that I shattered did come together. The place was made for Abigail in your world.
Wow, this is kind of heavy for breakfast. However, the concept of reversing time and therefore the effect of past trauma is one that speaks very much to me and is very apropos for my birthday breakfast. Hopefully appetizers are a little less dramatic. As another mend to the past, we are going to make the heart tartare tarts so I can finally get my own picture of them. But also, we'll be trying out the foie gras timbits, but we'll be using the book's alternative recipe for chicken liver pâté torchon instead of pricey foie gras. As a salad starter, we're going to be making the blood orange and Treviso salad, served with the book's recipe for beet juice vinaigrette. Now the main course is what I'm most excited for. Osso buco, which is veal shank that's roasted in vegetables and wine until it is fall off the bone perfection. This recipe comes to us courtesy of the muralist, who we've mentioned on this show before, an artistic madman who stalked and killed people of different shades of skin to stitch them together in a tableau of a large eye. Then in a bizarre even for this show twist, Hannibal somehow after meeting the muralist convinces him to be the new centerpiece after his last one quit, and just lets him stitch him into his own creation? This does prompt one of my favorite lines of dialogue from the show, though.
There is no God. Certainly not with that attitude.
And just for good measure, he takes his leg. Like you do. This also sparks one of the more entertaining stories from the cookbook about being on set, and one in a series where Mads Mikkelsen seems to be almost annoyingly good at everything his first try. As they only had one prop leg to work with, it was essential that they get Mads cutting it into pieces with a bandsaw absolutely correct the first time. Of course, Mads has never used a butcher's bandsaw in his entire life, but that doesn't stop him from doing it absolutely perfectly his first try, and then cool as a cucumber even cheekily tosses the foot aside into the sink. We need more seasons of this show, people, I'm just saying. Along with the ossobuco, we'll be serving the saffron risotto, and as a first for me, I am going to be trying to duplicate Janice's original sketch as close as I possibly can, which includes purchasing some very highfalutin edible gold leaf. For dessert, we come to another very interesting recipe with a very interesting history. Punch romaine. Now this scene is hilarious. While Hannibal is serving punch romaine to Bedelia and one of his more obnoxious guests, Hannibal does his usual Hannibal thing by saying something interesting about the recipe.
Punch romaine. A cocktail created by Escoffier. Served to first-class guests on the Titanic during their last dinner.
Okay, so this guy is dead. Dead. Yet after he shoves that ice pick through his temple, Hannibal hilariously claims,
It may have been impulsive.
and Bedelia even calls him on his crap.
Been mulling that impulse ever since you decided to serve punch romaine.
Definitely an interesting recipe to end the evening on and maybe get a little tipsy in the process. What can I say? There's not that many cocktail recipes in this book. Talking to you, Janice. It's a stressful cookbook. More booze. So as usual, we begin with the meat. I've already got another deer heart to make the heart tartare appetizers, and the good people at my favorite butchers have already provided me with the chicken and pork livers for the pâté, and were able to put me in touch with some people who could sell me some veal shanks as they were currently out. I seriously could not have found a better or more appropriately named butcher for this show. Now, the item that gave me the most trouble on this menu, more than any other ingredient I've ever seen on Hannibal and I, was Treviso. Now, I had never heard of Treviso, but when I started planning this show, I had never imagined that the one ingredient that would be impossible to find was lettuce? Well, apparently it's a form of radicchio, and radicchio was all I was able to find, so hopefully that's good. Treviso, if you're out there, get a better marketing department. The only other unique item we need is an ice shaver for the punch romaine. Even though the scene shows us Hannibal chipping away at a large decorative piece of ice, all my research has shown that punch romaine must be served with shaved ice, which is really not possible to get with an ice pick. And even so, it would take hours to get enough ice to fill up several glasses. So again, we head to Amazon, and I found a pretty good looking and fairly priced hand crank ice shaver, which I hope does the trick because the other options are over $200. So now that we have all of our ingredients and tools tools, we can begin with prep work.
We're going to begin by getting a few of our smaller, simpler tasks out of the way first, starting with the beet juice vinaigrette. So begin with a small pot and bring 2 cups of beet juice to a boil and continue until reduced by about 2/3. Now into that we're going to add a teaspoon of grated orange peel, a couple tablespoons of olive oil, a couple tablespoons of white wine, some salt and pepper to taste, then whisk all that together, then set aside to cool down for a bit before transferring it into its own serving bottle, and that's one recipe done. Next we need to make some simple syrup for our punch romaine, which you can buy but is also incredibly simple to make. So in a small saucepan, bring equal parts water and sugar to a slight simmer and stir until the sugar has melted, then set aside to cool slightly, add that to a condiment bottle, put that in the fridge until tomorrow, and that's another one done. Now we're going to make the crumble for our breakfast parfait, but for mine we're going to add some toasted almonds. So bring a pan to medium-high heat, sprinkle in your sliced almonds, and keep them tossing until they smell fragrant and are slightly browned. Next, add 2 tablespoons of butter to the pan, let that melt down as you sprinkle in a half a cup of instant oatmeal and a tablespoon of sugar. Now quickly mix it all up and allow it to toast and caramelize in the pan until the sugar dissolves and the oatmeal browns. Sprinkle it on some wax paper, spread it out nice and evenly to cool, then we can bag it until tomorrow, and that's another one done. Next is the white chocolate teacups we're going to serve our yogurt parfaits in. So start with a couple pieces of almond bark in a microwave-safe bowl, microwave in increments of 30 to 60 seconds, stirring in between until the chocolate is silky smooth. Now we need our molds to make the teacup shape, and water balloons make the perfect size, so blow up a couple of those. Then we'll go ahead and dip them into the melted white chocolate, pushing up until it reaches the widest part of the balloon. Then we'll go ahead and gently lift those out, leaving just enough on the bottom so when we place them on some wax paper, the resulting chocolate makes the base of our teacups. Now we take some of that melted white chocolate and place it in a makeshift piping bag, and we're going to draw out a couple of base clef looking figures to be the handles of our teacups. Now we can go ahead and pop the balloons, gently remove the pieces, and then take a heat source such as a lighter and gently melt the tips to weld, so to speak, the handle to the side of our teacups, and holding it for just a moment till it hardens, and voila, there we have our little chocolate teacups, and that's another one done. Now begins the more nitty-gritty of it, as we need to start by washing and rinsing our liver pieces for the pâté, and laying them out on some paper towels and patting them completely dry. Then, as we did in episode 3, we're going to soak our liver pieces in some milk for a couple of hours to pull out any remaining icky stuff. Then go ahead and rinse them and dry them once again. Now, to a large skillet, add a tablespoon of butter and 1 small chopped onion and cook until translucent and golden brown. Then we're going to set those aside into a bowl, add some more butter to the pan, and add your pork livers, tossing to brown them on all sides, but still slightly pinkish in the center. Then we're going to add those to the bowl of onions, and then deglaze our pan with a few tablespoons of brandy. Then scrape the bottom of the pan and add that to the bowl as well. Now we're going to repeat the process again with the chicken livers, noting that they will take slightly less time, and add those to the bowl, and just like before, deglazing the pan with some brandy and adding all that flavorful goodness to the bowl as well. Then we're going to salt and pepper our bowl of liver and onions and add some dried rubbed sage and toss it before we add it to the food processor and pulse it until just coarsely chopped. Then we're going to add in 3/4 of a cup of softened butter and a half a cup of softened cream cheese. Then go ahead and blend it up, stopping to scrape the sides until completely smooth, adding additional seasoning as needed. Once it's all blended up, we'll fill these molds made of cardboard Dixie type cups that are cut, shaped, and secured to have a cylindrical shape like you see here. Then once our molds are filled up, we'll place a little plastic over the top and refrigerate those for tomorrow, and that's yet another task in the bag. Now we begin working on our redemption recipe, the heart tartare, which is served in little phyllo dough shells. So get yourself a package of the stuff, gently unfold it, and lay out a single sheet, then take some melted butter and very gently brush the surface of the butter, being careful not to tear the sheets. Then lay over 2 more sheets of phyllo and gently press down to adhere to the butter, and repeat the process again by basting the sheet again and laying down another 2 sheets of dough before buttering the surface of the dough again and finishing with a single sheet, then gently press down all over to flatten. Then we'll go ahead and measure out a grid of 3 inches by 3 inches, then cut out our phyllo dough squares, putting the edges aside for decorative use later if you so choose. Then we'll go ahead and take a mini muffin tray and liberally butter those cups with our remaining melted butter, and we'll take our little phyllo squares and gently press them into the mold, being careful not to tear them, folding the sides over to make a nice decorative cup with the corners pointing up. Then we'll go ahead and do that with the rest of our squares and pop these babies into the oven at 375 degrees for just about 5 minutes until lightly browned. And that is the last of our prep work tasks. So if you'd like to see how breakfast as well as the fabulous dinner menu turned out, you can watch part 2 right here.